Let's get into our next debate. Should the King invite Harry and Meghan to visit? 0207 862 2222. Tell us what you think. Prince Harry reportedly hopes the King will invite him, Meghan, Archie and Lilibet to spend some time in Norfolk this summer. It's been 4 years since Meghan came to the UK, more than 4 years since Archie and Lilibet saw their grandfather. Harry has repeatedly said he doesn't feel safe to bring his family home unless he's given armed police protection. But if the King were to invite them, it's understood they would automatically get some sort of security. So there's a way around it, Christo. No?
Well, I mean, look, this sounds a little bit like blackmail, in as much as if you want to see me, then you have to ask me. There is nothing stopping Harry, if he wants to coming here. The idea that he would go to Sandringham and not have any security whatsoever is absolute nonsense. What are they going to do? Not look after him, not make sure that he's protected if he's in Sandringham seeing the King. So the idea he has to be asked by the King is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, he can't just show up, can he, really?
No, but he can say, I would like to bring my children to see you. I'm coming on this date because I know you're at Sandringham. I mean, that's what would be absolutely reasonable. And of course, he would be protected if he did that. The idea he wouldn't be is complete and utter nonsense. I mean, if he wants to come, he can. I would probably, if I was the King, say to him, you're more than welcome to come. Would love to see you. Here's a non-disclosure agreement. You can't put anything that we've spoken about on a Netflix show. You can't write a book about it. You can't do anything else. And I don't want to see it on chapter 17 of your next diatribe.
There is that betrayal, I suppose, for the King.
Why is it a betrayal?
Because you can't have private conversations and put them in a book if you're in a family.
Actually, Charles did in his book.
Well,
People forget.
That was in response to the Andrew Morton book.
No, he revealed his relationship with his father. How
we're going back 30 years.
So, you can't have double standards here.
There is a difference.
But also, I can't understand your viewpoint.
Why?
He's his father. His father's getting old. His father clearly wants to see him and the grandchildren. What does it matter to you if the King issues a formal invitation and everything is covered, including security? Why would you mind?
Well, look, if he wants to, like I said, he absolutely can. I would be very cautious about doing that. And the difference, I think, from what you're talking about with the book that Charles worked on with Jonathan Dimbleby, is that what you're referring to is when he spoke about the harshness of his upbringing, which I think was in a couple of pages of the book, whereas the whole of Harry's book was called Spare, and it was the entire modus operandi of the book, the entire thread of the book was, my life has been terrible, here's an entire book devoted to it. It's not a couple of pages.
It's not true.
Can't we just forgive?
Actually,
but in the end, sorry, just to interrupt, but let's put that to one side, Christo, because actually, blood is thicker than water. And Charles is, as Yasmin says, Charles is his dad. And if they mess around anymore, Charles won't be here to have this reconciliation.
But would it not be damaging to then have them come over? I don't trust that they wouldn't use it to either complain more, monetize, come up with more content for themselves, or anything else. And that actually damages the monarchy on a wider level.
You're talking about monetising? William and the King, between them, are ripping off this nation on their duchies, OK? And you don't mind about that. There are properties that they're letting out which are scandalous. And you don't mind that. And you mind these people.
Yeah, I do mind these people.
Why?
Look, we need to cut through all the pleasantries and the polite royal discourse here, because there's something genuinely significant happening beneath the surface of this entire just-come-home narrative that goes far beyond a simple family disagreement. This isn't just about whether Prince Harry can casually pop over to visit his father at some royal estate. What we're really talking about is power, control, security infrastructure, and the real-time manipulation of truth itself. The argument that's been circulating sounds straightforward on the surface. If the King invites Harry, he automatically receives security, so there's supposedly a solution built right in. Sounds simple, right? Almost too simple? And that's precisely the problem, because what this framing does, and it does it incredibly cleverly, is shift all responsibility away from the system itself and place it directly onto Harry's shoulders as an individual. It transforms what is fundamentally a structural, institutional issue into something personal. It suggests that if Harry isn't maintaining regular contact with his father, that's because he's actively choosing not to. He's making that decision himself. But that's not even remotely the full picture, and honest people know it. When we actually unpack the logic being presented here, we're told that Harry can return to the UK any time he wants, that protective security will automatically activate the moment he's on royal grounds, and that the entire idea of him lacking adequate security is complete nonsense. But here's where the argument completely falls apart under even basic scrutiny. Security for someone in Harry's position isn't just about standing inside palatial gates. It encompasses everything. The arrival process, how he gets there, movement between locations, visibility to potential threats, exposure at every stage, the actual physical risk involved. You cannot simply turn danger on and off like a light switch. You can't compartmentalize threat. And when this argument starts getting examined closely, it absolutely crumbles. Because if everything were genuinely that straightforward, if Harry were automatically fully protected the instant he stepped onto royal property, then why has this become a years-long legal battle? Why has it gone through formal court proceedings? Why has it required official decisions at the absolute highest governmental and institutional levels? These are simply not the characteristics of a problem that could be solved with a casual dinner invitation. But then comes the moment that really reveals what's happening. The suggestion, made almost as a joke, but not really, that if Harry were to visit, he should be presented with a non-disclosure agreement. Think about what that actually means. If I were king, the statement goes, I'd say you're welcome. Here is your NDA. That single statement tells you absolutely everything about the underlying mindset at play here, because it frames Harry not as a son, not as a family member, but as a potential liability, a threat to be managed, someone who must be controlled and contained. And the hypocrisy here is absolutely staggering, almost impossible to ignore. This is the exact same institution, this same firm that has spent literally decades operating in ways that many observers describe as extremely selective when it comes to privacy concerns. This is the same system where stories mysteriously appear in tabloids with uncanny, almost supernatural timing. This is the same apparatus where anonymous sources, palace insiders, and strategically placed narratives shape public perception every single day. And yet suddenly the concern is confidentiality. Suddenly trust matters. The notion that information flows deliberately and strategically out of royal circles isn't some fringe conspiracy theory. It's widely documented and acknowledged by serious journalists and historians. There are decades of reporting that demonstrate internal briefings, competing factions, and carefully cultivated media relationships that serve very specific agendas. Whether information originates from King Charles's household or Prince William's orbit, the pattern is consistent and recognizable. Stories don't just appear out of nowhere, they're actively fed to the press. So when people act shocked and ask how Harry could possibly share private conversations, you have to flip that back and ask where that outrage was when details about him, about Meghan, and even about his children were regularly appearing in newspapers. Where was the concern for privacy at that point? The answer is, it wasn't there, because this didn't start with Harry, and it certainly didn't end with him. Here's where the narrative starts to crumble under even the slightest scrutiny, and it's crucial we understand why. When someone casually suggests that Harry can simply come home with a royal invitation and suddenly all security concerns vanish into thin air, what they're really doing is shifting an enormous institutional responsibility directly onto Harry's shoulders. They're taking what is fundamentally a structural, systemic problem and repackaging it as a personal choice, a character flaw, a matter of willingness. That framing is not only clever, it's dangerous because it obscures the actual issue entirely. The reality of security for someone in Harry's position extends far beyond the romantic notion of stepping through the gates of a royal residence and being magically protected. Security isn't something you switch on and off like a light switch the moment someone crosses a threshold. It encompasses the entire journey, every single moment of vulnerability, from the second he arrives in the country, through his movements, during his visibility in public spaces, right down to his departure. It means protection during travel to the destination, protection during arrival procedures, protection throughout his stay, and protection during departure. Years of legal battles, court decisions, and formal governmental involvement make one thing abundantly clear. This is not a problem that dissolves with a casual invitation or a father's say-so. If it were truly that simple, why would this have consumed years of litigation? Why would it require formal decisions at the highest levels of the judiciary? Why would it continue to be contested and debated? These aren't the hallmarks of a situation that can be solved over tea and biscuits. And here's the part that reveals everything about the actual mindset at play. Harry has demonstrated, on multiple occasions, a willingness to pay for his own security. Let that sink in completely. He's not demanding anything free. He's not asking taxpayers to foot the bill. He's explicitly stated he will cover the costs himself, and he's still been told he cannot have adequate protection. When someone offers to pay for their own safety and is still denied that basic necessity, the argument that this is about entitlement completely falls apart. Because now we're not talking about money or privilege or taxpayer resources. We're talking about something far more fundamental: control. That's the real issue beneath the surface of every just come home narrative that circulates. It's about who decides, who controls access, and who gets to set the conditions. Let's be brutally honest about what's really happening here, because the hypocrisy is almost too blatant to ignore. For decades, and I mean the royal institution, has operated a very particular playbook when it comes to information. Stories leak from palace sources with remarkable timing and precision. Anonymous insiders brief sympathetic tabloids. Carefully curated narratives shape public perception on a daily basis. The system doesn't just leak, it disclosure. And yet, when we talk about Harry, suddenly everyone wants to clutch their pearls and talk about confidentiality, about trust, about betrayal. The audacity is stunning. Because here's the thing that everyone needs to understand. When information flows out of royal circles in a controlled, deliberate way, it's rebranded as communication, or setting the record straight. It's strategic, it's smart, it's just good PR. But the moment information comes from Harry, the moment decides to share his own experience, his own story, his own truth, it's labelled as a devastating betrayal of family privacy. That's not a principle, that's a power play. And it gets worse because this double standard becomes even more obvious when you look at the actual track record. Members of the royal family they've shared deeply personal details about their lives, their struggles, their relationships. No one screamed about betrayal then. No one suggested NDAs. No one called it exploitation of the royal name. But when Harry does it, when he tells his own story, when he owns his own narrative, suddenly he's the villain. Suddenly he's the one who violated some sacred code of silence that the institution has never actually followed itself. And now we get to the real kicker, the part that reveals the entire game. The suggestion that if Harry were to visit, he should sign a non-disclosure agreement. Think about that. An NDA. Not a warmth, not a welcome, not an open door. An NDA. What that statement really communicates is devastating in its clarity. Harry isn't being treated as a son. He isn't being treated as a family member. He's being treated as a potential threat. A problem to be managed, contained and controlled through legal documentation. That's not reconciliation. That's not family. That's institutional self-protection dressed up in the language of concern. And the irony is so sharp it could cut glass. Because the institution demanding Harry's silence, the very institution insisting he sign away his right to speak, is that has spent generations leaking, briefing and strategically feeding information to the press. They want to control narrative while maintaining complete freedom to control their own. They want access to all the tools of information control while denying him the same tools. That's not justice. That's not fairness. That's a system designed to protect institutional power at the expense of sized and weaponized against them at every turn. There's this deafening silence when it comes to how the royal institution itself generates and protects its wealth. We're talking about duchies, massive, profitable landholdings. We're talking about property portfolios worth hundreds of millions. We're talking about financial arrangements that benefit senior royals with virtually zero public scrutiny. But somehow, when Harry and Meghan step away from official duties and create their own media ventures, suddenly they're exploiting their royal connection. Suddenly, they're the problem. That's not just a double standard in a vacuum, and it definitely isn't a one-way street. If information, sensitive personal information about Harry, about Meghan, about their children, has been leaked from palace circles, fed strategically to tabloids, and shaped into narratives designed to harm them, then Harry has every legitimate reason to be cautious about what he shares within those walls. The palace has spent decades operating through carefully placed stories, anonymous sources and tactical briefings that serve very specific agendas. That's not speculation, that's documented. So when someone floats the idea of an NDA as a condition for a family visit, you have to recognize what that really signals. Harry isn't being seen as a son or a family member, but as a liability, a threat to be managed and contained. Yet the institution demanding that NDA is the same one that's never been held to the same standard of confidentiality. And here's the fundamental issue at the core of all this. True reconciliation, genuine, meaningful reconciliation, can't happen when one side is simply demanding compliance and silence. It can't happen when the conversation is framed as nothing is stopping him, while conveniently ignoring the very real barriers. Documented security threats that require serious protection, complicated legal battles that have required court intervention, trust that's been systematically eroded, and years of public conflict that can't be wished away with a casual invitation. The "nothing is stopping him" narrative is seductive because it's simple, but it's also fundamentally dishonest about what actually matters here.